ladies and gentlemen, is 10 after. So, game on. Welcome to the last lecture of Praxis for this year. Thank you for being here. We got a bunch of things to talk about. All systems appear go. So we're going to start by talking about the MIT COVID-19 challenge. It was a hackathon. It had a number of different elements to it, whether it was protecting vulnerable populations, helping health systems, and so on. And you know if it's coming up now, it's because something cool happened that involves people you know. So Team Isabella was looking at capacity. So how do you fit more patients into existing facilities, given that now you've got very different spatial requirements and different equipment requirements? Get rid of the Spotify black square. That's a really good point. Spotify black square gone. Thank you, Professor Sheridan. So that was their plan. And they said, we're going to use machine intelligence. We're going to map a space. We're going to figure out its floor plan automatically. And we're going to figure out how to lay equipment out. And we're going to do this all completely on device. And it's going to be cool. And let's see who Team Isabella was. And I'm like, wait a minute. Wait. We got a Google intern, a chem eng, a med student, electrical engineer, and we have Tracy Kahn. Oh, I mispronounced it. We have Tracy. That's what's important. Chief engineer, awesome. University of Toronto engineering science student, awesome. Your classmate, awesome. And I am told that they did very well. So I just want to congratulate Tracy and her team. And I'm going to call it her team because as chief engineer, she's going to be taking responsibility for the rest of the project. So cool. Go NSci. Go first year. I've been talking a little bit and perhaps being a little bit unfair, you might say, towards the people designing protective equipment. This is off of the Real Engineering podcast, or well, vidcast. And this particular one was a guide to designing low-cost ventilators. And it's a great, excuse me, it's a great episode. It really goes into the technologies and the issues and the theories and why ventilators are not as easy to design as you might think. All right. Let's try to understand engineering. It's what we've been doing all term. And one definition is an engineer is someone who can take a simple idea and unpack it, open up the black box, and see it through to the bottomless pit of messy complexity that lies underneath. And this is by a guy named Sean McGrath. Does software, but I kind of like some of his thoughts, not perfectly, but it kind of resonates. And you saw this a little bit when we talked about the model of a resistor, that you can do V equals IR, but then you've got to deal with all the rest of it. So what has Praxis been trying to do? Praxis has been trying to teach you this, or to help you become an NSci. And an NSci is someone, when you're confronted with this bottomless pit of messy complexity, you can frame it, you can scope it, you can find the useful parts, and you can get things done. So Praxis is about thinking, it's about stepping back, but it's also fundamentally about doing. And we want to make sure that that doing happens. Now, some of you have kind of said, look, I did before I got here. I did before I did Praxis. What's the big thing here? And this is a Buddhist or Zen, depending on who you ask. The attribution is a little suspect, but the idea is before enlightenment, you chop wood and you carry water. After enlightenment, you still chop wood and carry water. And I raise this because, yeah, could you have done all the work we've asked you to do in Praxis before you took the courses? And the answer is possibly. Some of you are just naturally very good at this. Some of you were well-trained before you got here. But much like enlightenment, having taken Praxis, the next time you have to do the things that we taught and introduced and shared with you, you're going to do them more deliberately, you're going to do them more reflectively, because you've had that opportunity and you've had that education in understanding why you do what you do and not just doing it. So, NSci Praxis 2T3, making sense of it, representation, sagas, preparation. I'm going at speed now. So here we go. We're going to start with some theory. And the idea is we want to learn through storytelling. Higher education is getting this idea that if you get students to tell stories, or if you tell stories, it helps you reflect, it helps you to improve learning. Really, it's this idea of stories are how people remember. So we're going to start telling some stories. So our storytelling with reflective learning processes, that's part of it. And we want to prepare you for the rigors and uncertainties in professional practice. And if you talk to engineers long enough, they'll tell you stories of their design work, stories of the stuff they've done. And that's how the knowledge is transferred and how the knowledge is shared. And if you're really interested in this, the engineering communication program has an elective course, and you may recognize the instructor. It's Dr. Penny Kinnear, who's been helping with Praxis, one of the core teaching team members. And there's a course, The Power of Story, Discovering Your Leadership Narrative, that you can choose to take. So once you've worked out the plot and message of your story, how can you represent the story for others and yourself? And I'm going to put forward, there's a bunch of different ways. You got your standard text. You could, write a book. You could do image-based photos or graphics. You could do movies. You could do songs. You could dance. There's lots of different ways to represent your story. And sometimes you're like, it's really hard to create a brand new story that's never been seen or heard of before. You can make something brand new, but you can also use existing representations, existing stories as your medium, but also as metaphor. And also, let's be blunt, you can shamelessly steal some of what's already there. All right, so what does this look like? Well, let's start with a game. So we're going to go right to the hardest one and say, okay, can you use a game to tell the story of Praxis and the story of learning? And let's see if Hearthstone is going to be there. And yes, we have a typo. Life goes on. All right, now we're not going to do song and dance because I don't sing and I don't dance. But I am fully willing to say, okay, let's talk about the various times you've had to be there talking about and defending your designs. You may have noticed at Praxis, a lot of what you do in studio is Q&A and is engaging and discussing. And Showcase, if it had happened, would be similar. And you remember seeing some of these pictures. And so the question sort of is, if I'm going to tell the story of a design critique or showcase, how do I represent this in my mind, both as I'm preparing, but also as I'm sharing it? And I'm going to say the way you do it is you do it with Hearthstone. Bear with me. So here we have our intrepid team of student engineering designers. Someone's a bit more leadery, someone's a bit more scout and researchy, someone's got like some epic build capabilities, and someone's going to go off and do some competitive intelligence on another team. So here we go. Step one, you gotta start. If you're going to go into one of these situations, you got to have good health and you got to be ready. So get some sleep. Don't forget to eat carbs and protein. Like, you got to take care of the body to help take care of the mind if you're going to have a design discussion. All right, so we do that. Then you get your preparation done, right? You get yourself psyched up. You go through your stuff. You get your arcane intellect. You get your resources. You collate and organize materials. Plug the holes. Be ready for the discussion because you know it's coming. You want to make sure you're prepped and things are organized. We seem to have a double. But you do it twice. That's the trick. You do more preparation to get your counter spells. You prepare your rebuttals. You know what's going to come out. You've been through these now. The next time someone asks you to justify a design decision, you're like, oh, I have this ready. I know what you're going to ask. You're going to ask, where'd my measurements come from? You're going to ask, what metrics did you use? What's your prototype trying to show? You know where this is coming. All right, so you got counter spell, you got your healing. You also dress and behave professionally. It's ethos. It's the representation of a student engineer who's on their way to becoming a professional engineer. So you're armored up, you're good to go, get some competitive spirit in, psych yourself up, make sure you're ready. And then the other parties show up. And you're like, okay, this is looking kind of grim, but it's okay. We got our secrets, we got our stuff, we're ready to go. And they take a quick shot. They're like, what's the purpose of your prototype? Boom, done. And you're like, ooh, okay, that kind of hurt. And then they go and they say, okay, well, what about, I don't even believe your framing. And now the person who talked to a stakeholder is feeling down. There's some stuff coming at you here. That's okay. You're like, hold on, I got this. I know where this came from. You dig through your package. You find your hidden cache of materials. You go there and you're like, okay, if I show them this, we show them this, here's our field notes, here's our comparison matrix, here's our testing protocol. That will help out. That'll bolster where you go next. So as presentations and Q&A happen, always use your supporting materials. Whenever you're talking to someone, have a tablet, have a binder, have whatever it is that you need to share your materials. All right, so far so good. If one of your teammates starts to struggle, it's like if there's a question that you're like, okay, my teammate's not in a position to handle that question, you step in because you're a team, right? It's more than okay to help each other out in a team situation. It's not sacrifice, it's support. All right, so we're doing okay. Maybe the questions start to get bigger. Maybe the questions you're just like, man, wow. But that's why you have your counter spells, because you're kind of knowing what the discussing team's gonna ask. And if you've got your counter spells and you've got, excuse me, your hidden cache of materials, you can handle the fireballs, handle the pyroblasts, and it's all good. So you can model, and this is how I do it in my head sometimes, preparing for one of these design discussions when you're going to be quizzed as designing a deck that has secrets and artifacts, and you're going to play those cards as the questions come in. All right, so it's one way to do it. So we can go back here and we can say, okay, we have the story of being a designer in a critique, and we can represent it in a game, and it's a little different, but it kind of works. All right, let's see if there's another representation that can help us. So again, it's all about a design discussion, a design critique.
You got me.
All right, so there you are. The other party has just walked up to you. You're like, look at my concept. Okay, your teammates are getting freaked out. They're like, dude, person, colleague, what are you doing?
Levels 8,000. Huh? Now it's over 9.
So your assessors are looking at you going, why is this person doing all of this? There's this push and this power grab. And in the end, because there's a meme.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000!
So one way you can think about a design discussion is that it's a means for you to show power and to intimidate those across from you. To say, I am in strong position, I am pushing against you. That's one way to look at it. There's another way to look at it. So, martial arts, some of them are very much about contacting and hitting and showing your own prowess, but not all of them are. Capoeira is a really interesting martial art where the premise is that you're actually helping the other person show what they can do. The goal isn't to hit. The goal isn't contact. The goal is to create an environment in which both parties can show their skill and can create that kind of mutual support. It's really cool. So you can think of a design discussion as grr and flex, or it's a collaborative demonstration of individual and team prowess. It's an opportunity for all parties to not be hit, but to show how they can anticipate and block. And this is how another way to look at it. So if we look at these, whenever you're entering into a new situation, whether it's a new teammate or a new team, it's a design discussion, it's a job interview, you choose how you present yourself and interact. Intimidation and dominance, or do you create a space when everyone can express themselves? And do you kind of hang back and be a supporting person? Or are you like Goku and you're out front and you're the one who's kind of the center of attention? These are all choices you get to make, whether it's in a design discussion, in a design team, in a lecture, all the time. Okay, so we've tried games, and the movie, again, you got to know the context, so maybe that's a little bit dangerous, but we tried it, we'll give it a shot. We kind of tried dance too, because capoeira is sort of considered a martial arts dance style. Let's do it differently. So it's been 7 months, and we're going to use pictures, and the question is, what just happened? Now, here's what's fascinating. Before things even started, the Praxis teaching team, we set out what our vision was. Engagement, observe, interpret, assess, the notion of experience, your experience, our experience, meaning, fabrication. And we even went one level further, and every member of the teaching team actually shared this is if praxis has gone well, what's the personal win? What is it we're going to be able to see, whether it's positionality in the course, notion of power and tension, the notion of taking risks. So this is what we set up before you arrived. Similarly, before you arrived, you got really good grades in high school, and you got accepted to U of T. And depending on a few things, your experience at U of T went a number of different ways. And one of the things we're going to share with you today is we have seen you grow. We have seen you excel. We have seen you become really, really good at this stuff. So it started with Dean Yip in Con Hall talking about the diversity in the class, talking about the number of different countries and cultures and languages. And in the first Praxis Studio, we challenged you to recommend where people should eat. And you're like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And the next thing you know, you had to share your logic, you had to give your decisions, you had to talk about your factors. And then your peers started to get it there, and they started to say, like, well, what are you trying to do? And what's this grid trying to do? And for the first, like, I don't know if it was the first time, but certainly you had to have this discussion, design, defense, critique. Things are going well. And then it got even tighter and more pods. But your first exposure to Praxis was, hey, we got to make decisions. We got to argue. And then you did horrible, nasty things to drills and toasters. And you got right in there, and safety glasses, check. Hair under control, check. All right, we got safety going well here. And you learned how to cannole, if you know the term, and you organize things, and you learn to see things in a different way. You also discovered who your faculty members were in ways that only you can understand. I don't quite know what beans are, I can guess, but the point is you started both to express yourselves and you started to understand those around you. Eventually you got to the whole crew and everyone got their own personality. That's okay, because then we went back in and you had to write a midterm. And a number of you were like, you're putting the midterm in the blue bin. We haven't even graded it yet. This is harsh. Fair enough, but we needed something to carry it in. And then academic performance kind of kicked in, and midterms kicked in, and it was an experience, and you kind of got there. So we said, you know what? Let's get you building. Let's get you making stuff out of foam core and reading diagrams and getting into the drawings. And some of you were like, I'm just not making a box. We're making a lot of boxes, and we're making totems, and we're going to put those totems outside of my 150, where we spend all of our time. Then things got real. FDCR kicked in, framing, diverging, converging, figuring out what projects you were going to work on, prototyping, figuring out faucets and angles, working things out, getting into sketching and drawing and brainwriting and all these tools and techniques to structure who you are. And so, or not who you are, what you're thinking. And little stick figures and getting your ideas out, and you're capturing them. And then you had to defend them again. And now we're recording it, but we still have this mentality of the four of us are going to talk to the two or three of you, and we're going to share our ideas, and you're going to critique, and it's going to be awesome. I kid you not, we actually thought about using Minecraft to do a virtual showcase and decided it was a little bit beyond us. But you started to bring your own tools, your own experiences into what you were doing. And it was kind of awesome. Now, some of you were not super happy about this idea of having to argue in a structured way. Oh well. And some of you started to experience, okay, that first week you're like, I got this, things are starting to buckle, but not that far. And then the light fabrication facility kicked in, and then it was time to build. Not just foam core, mat board. Admittedly, some of you were a little sketchy on the safety at this point, but that's okay. Meanwhile, not in Civ 102, you ended up doing your final critique, and I'm like, okay, does this work? We got a team, we got our leader, and we got our raider and all that. We've got Aya Blackpaw, who doesn't seem that aggressive. It seems pretty collegial here. And you got your cache of stuff, and it's like, okay, And I remember walking around and talking to teams and saying, like, did it happen? Did they ask you a question? And you're just like, boom, boom. And they're like, yeah, we totally had it. We could open the page. We could do what we needed. We had it ready. And it's like, yes. So maybe this metaphor works. Could go either way. Started to prototype, started to bring in the very expensive cardboard. Rat Lord, this one's for you. And again, science. You did science to stuff that you built it, you tested it, you scienced it, you did it right, which is pretty awesome. And this is still just at the end of Praxis 1. Meanwhile, your stuff was being tested by others on a very, very large Baldwin press. And the laser cut and all the other various styles. And you guys were into it. You were designing, you were building, you were calculating, you were sketching. It was pretty great. Similarly, the reason you got through Civ 102 were the extra help sessions, but that's the point. You leveraged the resources that were there. Now, sometimes you weren't always in the best of moods and you had to express yourself, and that's okay, right? You kind of own it. The key, okay, opinions have been expressed. We will read the opinions. We will ponder the opinions. But what I love is that you turned it around, is that it went from, you know what, everyone's trying to support. It's a team effort. Learning's a team effort. Let's do it right. You also had to teach me what that meant because it kept happening. That was Praxis 1 and Civ 102. Then you had to figure out your own projects. You had to figure out, are we into music? Are we into sports? Are we into what I think is spats or sparts? Well, we can swap it at least. Sports, music, we got airports. You got your stuff. But some of you are like, I don't want to work on that. I want to make things that shoot stuff. And you got back into the light fabrication facility. I'm noticing a surprising lack of eye protection here. Oh, well. And you launched things and you got points for it and you learned what worked and you learned what didn't. And things flew through the air and stuff happened. And what I love about it, as you know, we're going to have to change the rules a little because too many teams got perfect. But more importantly, you took notes and you learned and you reflected. And that's what's absolutely critical, is you didn't just do. You were getting into the habit of do and reflect and change. And then it was into Praxis 2 and figuring out which RFP you were going to go to and talking to your community and field notes. And by this point, you'd started to figure out, okay, where do we need to be a little more rigorous? Where do we need to be a little less rigorous? How does this play out? And I bet you right now, my colleagues are looking at this going, oh, Foster's having way too much fun right now. And it's probably true, and I don't care. And you learned about rubber ducks, and you learned about programming, and you came up with ideas, and you explained them to others and to inanimate objects. And in the end, you gave us 70 different projects for us to pick from. The fuzzy yellow thing is a platypus. And the RFPs were released, and you're like, okay, now what do we do with this? Because we got like 6 weeks to come up with something cool with designing and testing and FDCR processes and showcase and everything. And you talked and you learned and you researched and you went through it and you brought the tools back. You used them again, but this time with feeling. And you prototyped in low fidelity and you used whatever we could find at the dollar store. And you used cardboard and markers and Sharpies and index cards and Play-Doh, and stuff happened. And where you are now, you're separated, but you're still the Praxis 2 community. You're still building, you're still coming up with things, you're verifying, you're coming up with detailed design decisions. So if we go way back, I've got maybe, this is only a subset, I've got probably 700, 800 photos of you all working, plus all your assignments. We've got videos. You can look back and you can retrospectively say, hey, here's the memories, here's the visual recall of all the stuff we learned this term. And if you wanted to, not in term this year, you could even synthesize it and say, if I knew then what I knew now, so why don't we tell the ones coming behind us and go from there? All right, we've tried images. Now it's time to go to text. The way you go to text is you go to a saga. And you start with the first saga ever, the saga of Beowulf. But then you say, this is Praxis. praxis is about abstraction, and you realize that every frickin' Disney and Marvel movie is the same, and the next thing you know, you're talking the hero's journey. Hero's journey. All right, so life is good. It's high school. The grades came easy for some of you. Life was good, except English and TOK. We don't talk about them. And the next thing you know, Professor Cluett is basically saying, look, are you fearless? Do you want to do NSci? Like, NSci is for the fearless. And then this other person shows up and says, sure, you could solve math puzzles for the rest of your life. Or do you want to come and change the world? And you said, you know what? I'm going to accept this offer. I'm going to see what happens. And in comes the Praxis 1 syllabus. And you're like, cornerstone, foundation sequence, interactive, hands-on, practical, concepts, conceptual techniques. Yeah. Oh, by the way, 214 days ago was the first Praxis lecture. All right, so we come back here. We're called to adventure. And you're like, but why would I work on Praxis? Calculus and physics, that's so much easier. I've seen those before. And we're like, we got you. We got you. We got some supernatural aid coming. Teaching team, Foster, Irish, Sheridan, Kinnear, all the studio instructors from back then and the studio instructors now. Oh, quick point. We will be sending out an online studio teaching team set of evaluations. We always want to do better. Everybody wants to do better, and they want to know how they can do better. Course evals help too, but certainly course evals don't cover the people who you spend a lot of those times with the check-in. So we're going to get there soon. Now, what's supposed to happen now is supernatural aid. Let's talk about supernatural aid. First lecture, the world as it is, the Hoover Dam. We perceive, we bring it back, we model, we build. Okay. Second lecture, arguments actually have a structure. Grounds, claims, evidence, counterclaims, acceptance. There's a textbook you can refer to. You can't just say, you should believe me because I'm me. You got to argue. Meanwhile, you've also got to realize that people are going to perceive what you do differently. You got to interpret that everything that happens to you is going to be filtered through perceptions, filtered through beliefs, filtered through experiences. And then the design thing came back, and it's like, look, 4 things. All I need you to do, remember 4 things: frame, diverge, converge, represent. Make some decisions, recommend some stuff. Easy peasy, right? Now, there's the whole never starts, never ends, always happens, got to have records, which is a bit of a pain. But yeah. Then we said, well, I got some structure for you. Got your stakeholders, objectives, metrics, constraints. Each of these things does something. So I kid you not, after the first week, full week of classes, the core models were there. The doing hadn't been done, but the overarching structures were there: verification, validation, requirements, the works. Things started to get interesting now. We start to refine things, getting into different kinds of claims, crazy ideas, analytical and speculative, where the justification comes in. We introduced the measurement matrix, this idea that, look, you do math and science to things to make decisions. It's kind of awesome. And then you can make a comparison matrix, which we did not call a Pew chart because Wikipedia is wrong. And we started to talk about, okay, better, worse, same. Can you add them up? If you add them up, are you losing too much information? Started to mess with this. And we got into introductions, lecture 7. You know, you can't just launch into something. You gotta put some background, some purpose, set things up, kind of like we do in lecture, even though sometimes we don't get there until about 35 minutes in. All right. 2 full weeks of Praxis 1, first 2 full weeks, you not only have the high-level models, you're getting into depth, and it just keeps going and going and going. Now, earlier, it was like, in the olden days, I am the student in the class who's doing very well. I traditionally get high marks. You should believe me. And now we're into no ethos yet. And I'm not sure about the pathos, but into the logos and into the balancing and this idea that in praxis, you got to balance stuff. You got to figure out how it all plays together. So what was really interesting about this is this was all praxis, but at the exact same time, you were taking other courses. Programming, math and computation, the one that everyone forgets, calculus, physics, linear algebra, molecules, materials. So not only were we providing you with ways of thinking about engineering, design, communication, teamwork, all your other courses were giving you things that you could use in your design activities. All the models you've learned, every course has contributed to this course because you've got to fill in those measurements. You've got to do those comparisons. You've got to come up with ideas. For those of you in the chat, that's your own meme. All right, supernatural aid. You're looking good. You're feeling good. First threshold shows up, right? What's the first threshold? Well, you got to learn how to interrogate your reactions. You've got to learn how to reconsider your position. You've got to go back through and really understand. And then your first belly of the whale, the midterm. And you're like, okay, this is new to me. I got to express myself. I got to take what I've done. I got to put it down. All right, we can do this. Midterm exam. Okay, midterm's done, but now there's more trials. Whole gauntlet of trials, crazy amounts of trials. Well, this was Praxis 1. And eventually, by the end, in December 2nd, you were complete. Now, to be honest, let's play this out like it really is.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
In addition to everything I just showed you, pairwise comparison, judgment, objectives, dossier, requirements, prototypes, framing, like we introduced you to a ton of specific tools inside of decomposing from those high-level things. So, okay, here's the deal. Praxis, engineering, design, communication, teamwork. It's attitudes and approaches, not tools and definitions. We really want you to know, I need some way to eliminate. I need some way to compare. Oh, I'll call those things constraints. I'll call those things criteria, but it's about doing. Everything in design and praxis is about doing. Admittedly, common definitions do help. And what we want to find out is how entrenched are your habits of mind? How will these, as you've gone through all of these activities, how did they lock in to the way you think? All right, the road of trials. I have no idea what this one actually is in this context, so we're just going to go on. And finally, you get the big one. You get the atonement. You get the final exam in Praxis 1. And to get there, you synthesize your knowledge. You bring it together. You organize it. You structure it. You color code it. You do whatever you have to do to see how you're doing, to understand your own thinking. You have kittens. You have ethos in the form of Professor Collins. You represent your knowledge. You develop your own understanding. You synthesize it together. Memorization is good. Synthesis is better because you can always look up terms. Knowing how they relate, knowing how they come together is what's critical. And then you do it. You've done it. Achievement unlocked. You've passed ESC101, NSci 1F, because you're listening to this lecture right now. And now you're like, hey, you know, like this engineering design stuff, like we got this. I own this. But then something else happens. Now it's about the good of society. Effective, verified, validated improvement and a lived experience of a community with directly accessible representation in the GTA. And you're like, but I've done this. I've done this before. Why? Why is this happening to me? So you dig back in, you go back into the tools. And Professor Irish may speak in a moment, perhaps.
Sorry, you were in such a great flow. I didn't.
You don't want to interrupt the flow.
Didn't realize I was in.
Take the flow. Take the flow.
Yeah. So we're back into the tools, and you know, we aim to arm you, right? So you're trying to have the tools that allow you to do the various things, and then you use them, and you use them again. You get more skilled with them, and so next.
Well.
And by doing that, you aim to have the structure, right? So we aim to talk about the structures of argument and the ways in which you can use that structure. Next.
Yep.
And in addition to thinking about structure, you've now gained your logos, you've gained some ethos, you're now able to think about how to connect emotionally with your audience, and you're thinking about, all right, what are the patterns, what are the ways that we use these things, and always having that as part of your battle readiness. And then we start to say, hey, it's not just that. We have some of the structures down to the level of the paragraph, down to the level of the sentence. We want to say, what are the ways in which we get control of these things? Because we can't just kind of use a sword always as a broadsword. Sometimes we have to be able to do the finesse move, getting in under the chink in someone's armor.
So as communication was being refined, as you were getting these various levels, you also had to realize that the design part was also fractal. You break it down, you get into details, you go into the depths. You turn off your mic. And then we showed it to you again, but this time in the context of your own handbook. And what is it you're going to do? How is it you're going to understand all these different levels? So there was Praxis 2, and we went through a bunch. And I should point out, we're presenting this in a very linear way. Your abilities have grown much more than linear. I mean, at least sort of quadratic. And if you go way back, we actually talked about, hey, if you can learn faster, if you can do better, if you can advance more quickly, then you're really starting to get this. You've learned how to learn. And hopefully by now, you're a little more efficient, a little more effective, and you can progress so much more quickly in engineering design and communication and teamwork and leadership. But praxis being praxis, we would also talk about how you can do this in the general case, how to support your knowledge, how to not just do design, communication, leadership, teamwork, but also how to study, how to learn. And key to this is this idea that knowledge, skills, like all across the board, it's a mesh. They interconnect. Some of you are starting to see connections between your courses. Success in learning comes from developing and sharing that own mesh. And that's why you want to go back. You want to go back to your concept map. You want to make it more comprehensive. You want to make it future looking. You want to make it something that you can put in your handbook and kind of refer to later on. Handbook coming in, 415. All right, so then you come here and you're like, and this is not the easiest thing to read. All right, you cross the threshold. You're utterly changed by your journey. You can never see things the way you used to. You've understood, you've reflected, and you're feeling good about yourself.
The Force is with you, young Skywalker. But you are not a Jedi yet.
So you look ahead, back to the start. You look at next term. You're like, I'm seeing the word design. Oh, I'm seeing praxis again. And you're like, okay, praxis 3, praxis 4, like, what are we up to here? Are we supposed to now design to survive and squirrel? And not quite, not quite. This year, praxis, ESC204, praxis 3 was design a robot that will plug in an electric car charger. It started by building small rovers. It moved on. Look at the tools, morph charts, Gantt charts, Pew charts, cardboard prototypes. It's all praxis again. You sketch, you have ideas, you share your ideas, you have them critiqued, you discuss, and the next thing you know, you got yourself a prototype and you're like, wait a minute, this thing could actually work as long as the height doesn't change. Oh wait, that thing does have a Z-axis. It has a Z-axis. Cool. Can't get any closer though. And you get critiqued again, and you learn again, and you get new skills again, and you see people again. And some of you do rovers, and some of you do linear, and what you do is you build, and you design, and you create, and you make, and you become better and better at bringing your classwork together. So next year, 204 is going to have new instructors and new projects, but here's what I can tell you for sure. They expect you to be able to design, they expect you to be able to use the praxis tools, and they expect you to have a handbook. Just saying. And then you've got your upper year, your capstones, all these other courses, and your thesis as well. And so we can do this as the hero's journey. And like, let's talk about the one true hero. Oh, yeah, our man Goku. And so it's kind of like you start here, and yeah, you're probably not Super Saiyan God, but you're probably not just like the basic Saiyan. Like, hopefully by now, you're kind of like Super Saiyan 1. All right, so we'll label this a little bit. High school, Praxis 1, 2, Praxis 3, and Capstone. So Praxis 1 and 2 kind of gets you that basic Super Saiyan. And then you skill up to Praxis 3, but by Capstone, maybe you've done PY, you've ascended. And then life is where you carry it on. And it's that first limit, that first transcendence that is always the toughest jump. And that's what we've been working with. Now, we've been really focusing on design courses, but that's not the only place that you can practice design, communication, and teamwork. There's some others, and Professor Irish is going to introduce them to you.
Yeah, so one of the things to be aware of is that communication becomes part of everything you do as you move on into the upper years. So you're going to see it next year in a couple of places. Next.
Yep.
So I am actually going to be part of the teaching team with you again in engineering and society next year. So you can look forward to that. We'll kind of stretch your brain. We'll think a lot about ethics. We'll think about how engineering impacts our world and that kind of thing. You'll also next year get a complementary studies elective. And I want to just maybe do a bit of a plug, but also say pick wisely there. So we'll come back to that in a second, and we'll think about a few electives. As you move off, this is just machine intelligence. So I picked one option, and you can kind of have lots of communication stuff within your intro to machine intelligence course. A fairly major report that comes along with your project in that course. You'll be working in the options seminar. And then as you move into fourth year, you'll have your thesis, you'll have electives, you'll have a capstone. All of those are places where communication happens. So just about those complementary studies, elective choices, choose for interest and value, not for ease. I hear sometimes students saying, oh, our course load is so heavy, you need to take a bird course. I'm going to say, no, you don't. Come on. You want to take courses that are going to be valuable to you and that are going to help to shape the way you think. So I would encourage you to do those kind of courses instead. And here's a couple who we think are pretty good. There is a certificate in communication. Right now, those courses are all listed as APS for the current year, but in 2020, 2021, they're going to become TEP courses. And so you can see the list of them there. Take any three and you have a communication certificate. Yep, you can move to the next one, Foster.
Yep.
And you'll see this one is language and meaning, and you may notice in the top right corner there's the instructor who is Professor Penny Kinnear. And then there's also language and power, and if your screen is like mine, then Professor Foster is blocking the instructor there, but that's my course, and I teach that one. I would encourage you to consider one of those if you're looking for electives, and you might find the certificate something that you want to take up. So you can look up all those courses. There are some testimonials from some students who've taken some of those courses on the website there. So have a look and see if there's something that will appeal to you.
Professor Sheridan.
Next slide.
So if you're looking for more leadership than communication focused courses, and we do have a number that are crossover between leadership and communication, just like the narrative course that Professor Foster has been using to structure today's lecture. There's lots of both CS and HSS options here. We do have a certificate. A lot of our courses are cross-listed with the business minor as well, but I'll also put in a plug for some of our co-curricular activities. So if you're looking for something to do this summer, we do have a field program that you could look up on our website and engage in some more leadership and teamwork learning over the summer. Now you can press the slide. For each of our courses, we've got a little promo video that has one of the instructors talking about the course, what it's like, what are some of the concepts, what kind of a feel would you get out of the course. This is one of our core courses that I teach in engineering leadership. And so if you want a good laugh, you can watch me talk for 3 minutes about the course. But a lot of the studio activities you've seen around teamwork, coming up with your values, defining what they are, starting to think about team objectives and framing how you want to create your team and your design experience are all activities that you can explore in greater depth and with greater conceptual kind of founding in the CS and HSS courses like engineering leadership.
So I'm going to come back in because we have about 5 minutes, so stick with us. I think it's really important to talk about the leadership side and to talk about, yep, you have your progression, you have your growth, but you've also got your Z fighters. You've got the people who are with you, your teammates. And yeah, you might be a leader or you might be someone a little bit further back. You might also be the one who always has the senzu beans. The key is that you're never in this alone. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. But this idea of leadership and teamwork and growing skills and applying models is the way to play. So there's lots of places, and we haven't even talked about teams and projects and Kickstarter and all these other things. So there's lots of ways that you can practice design communication and teamwork and engage in rigorous praxis, kind of like some of the people who are currently working on flatten.ca are. All right, so we've done the text of the book, but I think there's another book because we've been looking backwards and kind of looking lateral. And I want to look forward, and I want to look forward in a very classic way. Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss, as editorialized by Jason Foster and contextualized for engineering science. And I feel such shame that I forgot my paper copy. Here we go. Congratulations, today is your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away. Admittedly, you're not fully off and away until the 30th, but bear with me for this. You have brains in your head and feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose as long as you keep an appropriate 6-foot distance from anyone else around you. You're on your own and you know what you know. And you are the guy or girl or person of whatever self-designated gender you wish. I'm going to get in trouble for that, I can tell. Who'll decide where to go. Dr. Seuss was writing at a different time. You do know, however, that you got year 1 in your head and you've got year 2 coming. So again, however you choose to self-identify. You'll look up and down streets, look them over with care. And some you will say, I don't choose to go there. With your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to go down any not so good street. And you may not find any you'll want to go down. In that case, of course, you'll head straight out of town. Now, look, quick point here. As engineers, you have both the right and the responsibility to do the right thing and to do it correctly. If you look at it and you're like, this is not right, I'm not doing it. If you're like, you're asking me to do this wrong, I'm not doing it, I'm going my own way. And it can be aero, biomechanical, mathematics, fine arts, college, startup. It doesn't matter. What matters is you've been through year 1 and Sci, and you've survived and you're awesome. And you can do what you want to do. It's opener there in the wide open air. And let's just keep in mind, you have like 50 years until you retire and a diverse world of opportunities to explore. So the time now is a starting point. It's a foundation. It's an enabling skill for the next 50 years of your life. You'll be on your way up. You'll be seeing great sights. You'll join the high flyers who soar to high heights. Admittedly, in 3F, the core 8 will have a little more subject matter knowledge, but you'll catch up. We got this, right? You won't lag behind because you'll have the speed. You'll pass the whole gang and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you fly, you'll be the best of the best. Wherever you go, you will top all the rest because NSci. Except when you don't, because sometimes you won't. I'm sorry to say so, but sadly it's true. That bang-ups and hang-ups can happen to you. You can get all hung up in a prickly perch, and your gang will fly on, and you'll be left in a lurch. And how you react to your performance is as important as how you perform, especially when there's a mismatch between your desired and actual outcomes. You'll come down from the lurch with an unpleasant bump, and the chances are then that you'll be in a slump. And when you're in a slump, you're not in for much fun. Unslumping yourself is not easily done. However, fortunately, especially because you are NSci at U of T, you are not alone. You'll
It's
come
14
to
hours.
Yeah, well, we're going through 14. You will come to a place where the streets are not marked. Some windows are lighted, but mostly they're dark. A place you could sprain both your elbow and chin. Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? How much can you lose? How much can you win? And if you go in, should you turn left or right in 3/4, or maybe not quite, or go around back and sneak in from behind? Simple it's not, I'm afraid you will find, for a mind maker upper to make up their mind. Don't let fear, uncertainty, or doubt freeze you. Life is movement, so you've got to move. You'll get so confused that you'll start to race down long wiggled roads at a breakneck pace and grind on for miles across weirdish wild space, headed, I fear, for the most useless place, the waiting place. But be careful that you just don't move nowhere fast, that you don't just move for the sake of it. Pause, breathe, and move again. For people waiting, all sorts of things they're waiting for. I'm just going to say, we don't need to list it. I'm just going to say again, life is movement, so move. No, static is not for you. Somehow you'll escape all that waiting and staying. You'll find the bright places where boom bands are playing. Somehow not so useful. So if you're stuck, if you're like, I don't know what I should do with engineering, I don't know what I should do with my academics, my career, my life, redo Praxis 1 and 2. Find another opportunity, do a kickstart, find an interesting community, take field notes, engage, immerse, and learn. Help make the world a different and better place than it is. There are sagas, there are tales, there are things, there are whaling, there are monsters. It's all there. Your time in NSci will be full of ups and downs. And the keys to success: integrate theory and practice, balance intuition and rigor. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. Strange and kind of cool, quite frankly. So be sure where you step with care and great tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. Never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot with your left. Balance intuition and rigor. Trust your intuition, assess it critically. Trust your tools, don't become dependent on them. And your greatest asset is your community of classmates, so diverse, so interesting, upper year colleagues, alumni, faculty members. You've got all these amazing strange birds around you who can help you move through. And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Kid, you'll move mountains. And why do I know this? Because our tear down and build up item was your identity, and you're an engineer, a student engineer now. So be your name Buxbaum or Bixby or Bray or Mordecai Ali Van Ali O'Shea. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting. So get on your way, and never forget, Praxis fosters friendships, and those friendships last a long, long time. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all here. Professor Foster, Professor Irish, Professor Sheridan, Professor Kinnear. You know how to find us. You know how to keep in touch. It has been an absolute pleasure to get through Praxis 1 and 2 with you. It has been a pleasure to work through so many things and to grow and learn with you. Have a great day.